Every single person on this earth is living their own separate life, but the most amazing thing about our world is how all these different lives end up crossing paths in ways we can never see coming. Sometimes, a tiny decision you make on a random Tuesday morning can completely alter the destiny of someone living on the other side of the planet 20 years later. This beautiful, messy, and incredibly complicated web of human connection is exactly what the 2018 romantic drama movie called Life Itself is all about. This film was written and directed by Dan Fogelman, who is famous for making people weep buckets with his storytelling. He brings together a massive star-studded group of actors including big names like Oscar Isaac, Olivia Wilde, Olivia Cooke, Antonio Banderas, Annette Bening, and even the legendary Samuel L. Jackson. If you are planning to sit down and watch this movie, you need to grab a giant box of tissues right now. This is not your typical, happy-go-lucky romantic comedy where everything gets resolved with a sweet kiss at the end. This is a heavy, emotionally intense journey that will make you sob like a baby. Seriously, it hits you right in the gut almost immediately. Some people cannot even make it 15 minutes into the story without their eyes welling up and their nose sniffing. The movie is designed like a big puzzle made of 5 different chapters, jumping across generations and moving all the way from the busy streets of New York City to the quiet, sun-kissed olive groves of Andalusia in Spain. Today, we are going to look at this whole story from start to finish, talk about what makes it special, and look at both the good and the bad parts, all in a very relaxed, easygoing, friendly conversation. Let us start at the very beginning by breaking down this winding journey, which unfolds in a straight line from one generation to the next, even though the characters themselves are completely unaware of how their fates are linked. The story kicks off with a funny and surprising introduction narrated by Samuel L. Jackson himself, who plays a fictionalized version of himself explaining the concept of an unreliable narrator in stories. But the real story begins in New York City with a man named Will Dempsey, played by Oscar Isaac. When we first meet Will, he is an absolute emotional wreck. He is deeply depressed, drinking heavily, and seeing a therapist named Dr. Elena Morris to try and process a massive trauma that has completely shattered his mind. Through his intense therapy sessions, we get to see his past and learn all about the great love of his life, a woman named Abby, played by Olivia Wilde. Will and Abby were college sweethearts, and their love story was the kind of romance people dream about. They met at a university party, fell head over heels for each other, and became completely inseparable. Abby was a brilliant, passionate young woman who was obsessed with music and writing a thesis about the concept of the unreliable narrator in literature, arguing that life itself is the ultimate unreliable narrator because it constantly tricks us. They eventually got married, moved into a beautiful apartment, and were blissfully happy, especially when Abby became pregnant with their first child, a baby girl. Will worshipped the ground Abby walked on, and their future looked incredibly bright. But life, being the cruel narrator that Abby always talked about, decided to throw a horrific curveball. One afternoon, while walking down a busy street in New York, a devastating accident occurred. A city transit bus struck Abby right in front of Will's eyes. This sudden, violent event ended Abby's life instantly, leaving Will completely alone and traumatized. The shock of losing his soulmate in a split second drove Will into a deep, dark spiral of psychosis. During his final therapy session, after finally confessing the full truth of his pain to his doctor, Will stands up, pulls out a gun, and ends his own life right there in the office. It is a shocking, incredibly heavy moment that leaves the audience completely stunned. The story then shifts to the second chapter, focusing on the child Abby was carrying, who miraculously survived the accident. Her name is Dylan Dempsey, played as a young adult by Olivia Cooke. Because both of her parents died on that tragic day, Dylan was raised by her loving grandfather, Irwin. Growing up with the heavy shadow of her parents' tragic history, Dylan turns into a deeply troubled, angry, and rebellious young woman. She finds an escape from her internal pain by fronting a loud, aggressive punk rock band. She wears dark clothes, acts out against society, and struggles to form any real, meaningful connections because she is terrified of losing people the way her parents lost each other. On her 21st birthday, Dylan is sitting on a bench in New York City, feeling completely lost, trying to figure out what her purpose is in a world that has been so cruel to her family. Right at this moment, the movie transports us far away across the ocean to Spain, introducing us to a completely different set of characters whose lives seem to have absolutely nothing to do with New York. We meet a wealthy, older man named Mr. Sacconi, played by Antonio Banderas, who owns a massive, beautiful olive plantation in the countryside of Andalusia. Sacconi is a lonely man who has achieved immense financial success but has no family to share it with. He decides to hire a hard-working, honest local man named Javier Gonzalez to be the foreman of his estate. Javier is deeply in love with a beautiful woman named Isabel. With the money he earns from his new job with Sacconi, Javier is finally able to marry Isabel, and they soon welcome a beautiful baby boy named Rodrigo. For a few years, their life is wonderful. Sacconi becomes a close friend of the family, acting like a generous godfather to young Rodrigo. He pays for the boy's education and provides the family with everything they could ever need. However, this generosity creates a quiet, poisonous jealousy. Javier begins to notice the deep emotional bond growing between his wife Isabel and the wealthy Sacconi. Javier feels inadequate, believing that he cannot give his family the kind of sophisticated, intellectual life that Sacconi offers. This silent tension eventually breaks the marriage apart, and Javier leaves the plantation, completely heartbroken. Years pass, and young Rodrigo grows into a brilliant, athletic young man. Sacconi continues to support him financially, eventually sending him to study at a top university in New York City. Rodrigo is excited to experience the big American city, but the curse of tragedy seems to follow this family line as well. While in New York, Rodrigo receives a devastating phone call from Spain informing him that his beloved mother, Isabel, is dying of cancer. Rodrigo rushes back to his homeland to spend the final days by his mother's side. After Isabel passes away, a broken-hearted Rodrigo decides to return to New York to try and rebuild his life and honor his mother's memory by making something of himself. This brings us to the final, beautiful convergence of the story. One afternoon, while walking down a street in New York, Rodrigo is looking at his phone and distracted by his thoughts. At the exact same time, Dylan Dempsey is walking out of a coffee shop. Because neither of them is paying attention, they bump into each other, causing Dylan to drop her things. As Rodrigo kneels down to help her pick up her items, their eyes meet. In that singular, quiet second, the entire universe aligns. The son of the Spanish plantation foreman and the daughter of the tragic New York sweethearts connect. The movie then reveals that Rodrigo and Dylan fall deeply in love, healing each other's generational wounds. They get married and have a daughter of their own. The film ends with a young woman standing on a stage in front of a large audience, reading from a book she wrote. This young woman is Elena Dempsey Gonzalez, the daughter of Rodrigo and Dylan. She is named after the therapist who tried to save her grandfather Will. Elena reads the final pages of her book, which is titled, Life Itself. She explains to the audience that even though life can bring unimaginable grief, pain, and loss, it also brings beautiful new beginnings if you just keep walking forward. The final shot shows the entire family lineage, alive in memory, proving that love truly echoes through time. Now that we have gone through this emotional roller coaster of a plot, let us sit down and talk about the merits, or the good things, that make this movie a deeply impactful experience. Incredible and raw acting. The absolute biggest strength of this film is the quality of the acting from the main cast. Oscar Isaac delivers a performance that is raw, painful, and incredibly honest. The way he portrays a man drowning in grief is so realistic that it makes you feel uncomfortable in the best way possible. You can see the heavy weight of sorrow in his eyes and hear the cracks in his voice. Olivia Wilde matches his energy perfectly, bringing a vibrant, electric joy to the screen that makes her character's sudden absence feel like a massive void. Olivia Cooke is fantastic as the angry punk rocker, showing the hidden vulnerability beneath her tough exterior, while Antonio Banderas brings a gentle, sophisticated sadness to his role in Spain. A gorgeous and moving soundtrack. The music in this film is absolutely phenomenal and plays a huge role in making you cry. Dan Fogelman uses Bob Dylan's famous album, Time Out of Mind, as a core piece of the story, and the songs blend beautifully with the emotional highs and lows of the characters. The background score is sweeping, elegant, and filled with gentle piano melodies and soaring strings that make the romantic moments feel grand and the tragic moments feel incredibly profound. The music acts like a warm blanket that holds the entire multi-generational story together. Stunning visual presentation. The movie looks absolutely beautiful from start to finish. The cinematography does a wonderful job of contrasting the two main settings. New York City is filmed with cool, sharp tones, busy streets, and tight spaces that reflect the internal chaos and loneliness of Will and Dylan. On the flip side, the scenes in Spain are drenched in warm, golden sunlight, vast green fields, and slow, sweeping camera movements that give that segment a classic, timeless, and poetic feel. This visual shift keeps the viewer engaged and makes the two worlds feel distinct yet equally alive. A powerful message about resilience. At its core, the movie offers a very comforting thought for anyone going through hard times. It does not shy away from the fact that life can be deeply unfair and painful, but it reminds us that our stories do not end with our tragedies. The message that love can survive through generations and that good things can come out of bad situations is a very beautiful, uplifting theme that stays with you long after the movie ends. Every coin has two sides, so let us be completely honest and talk about the demerits, or the weaknesses, that hold this film back from being perfect. Way too melodramatic and manipulative. The film sometimes tries way too hard to make the audience cry. Instead of letting the sadness happen naturally, it throws tragedy after tragedy at the characters in a way that can feel a bit emotionally exhausting and manipulative. You have a sudden bus accident, a suicide, cancer, and broken marriages all packed into 2 hours. For some viewers, this constant barrage of misery can feel less like a realistic story and more like a deliberate attempt by the director to pull at your heartstrings until you break down. A jarring and disconnected structure. Because the movie is broken down into distinct chapters with different narrators and settings, the flow of the story can feel very uneven. Just when you get deeply invested in Will and Abby's romance in New York, the movie completely shifts gears and takes you to Spain to introduce a whole new family. It takes a long time for the audience to adjust to the new characters and understand how they connect to the main plot, which can cause the pacing to drop significantly in the middle section. Preachy and on-the-nose dialogue. While the concept of the unreliable narrator is interesting, the characters spend a lot of time explicitly talking about it and explaining the philosophy of the movie directly to the audience. Instead of showing the themes through natural actions, the script occasionally becomes a bit preachy, with characters giving long speeches about the meaning of life, fate, and grief that sound more like a textbook than real people talking. When you look at everything together, Life itself is a massive, ambitious, and deeply emotional film that wears its heart proudly on its sleeve. It is definitely not a movie for everyone, especially if you prefer subtle, quiet dramas or light-hearted romances. But if you are willing to look past its highly dramatic nature and just let yourself feel the raw emotions, the incredible performances and the beautiful message of hope will touch your heart deeply. It serves as a loud, emotional reminder that no matter how dark the current chapter of your life might seem, the story is still being written, and the next page might hold something truly beautiful.